We are continuing in the Gospel of Matthew this week. Get some more parables. Isn't that exciting? More parables on sowing. You know, it has to be important because Jesus is talking. There's a lot of parables going on now, right here in a row, about preparing the ground, seeds being tossed out into the ground, and the kind of soil that is there, what's receiving them, how they are received. And now this parable about weeds among the wheat. So listen, if you've heard this before, I invite you to listen with fresh ears. Be open to something new, potentially. And if you haven't heard this before, hold on. Hold on to your seats. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seeds in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The slaves said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn." Then Jesus left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." He answered, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers. And they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen." May the hearing of these words add insight and blessing to your lives. So when I was in my wonder years, middle school-ish, those years, we lived in Carthage, Indiana. And in Indiana, if you know much about Indiana, you'll know that, there's a famous motto for Indiana Beach. It's an amusement park. And it says, "There's more than corn in Indiana." Which is really to say there's just a lot of corn in Indiana. So when I was in my wonder years, up through about a freshman in high school, I spent my summers detasseling corn, right? That's what you did to earn money. It's hard work, detasseling corn. But then, between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, we moved from Carthage, Indiana, tiny little town, to this other tiny little town called Lovington, Illinois, central Illinois. If you know anything about central Illinois, you will know, especially at that time, it's very flat. You could just see for miles and miles and miles. And what you would see if you stand outside the little town and look out, you will just see it's surrounded by, not corn, although there is some corn there, soybeans. There's a good Illini right there. Lots and lots of just fields of soybeans. So beginning my summer between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, I worked at Walking Beans. Those are the good old days, Walking Beans. I learned a lot from Walking Beans. And if you don't know what Walking Beans is, it's pretty simple. What makes it nicer than detasseling corn is that beans don't get nearly as high, so they don't whip in your eyes, and you don't have to wear long sleeves because, in the cornfield you have to protect from getting cut by the leaves of the corn stalks. But beans, you can just wear the jeans and a short tank or a t-shirt, and it's much more comfortable, for one. But you still have to start early in the morning because the heat by midday is suffocating. It's the humidity and the hot sun. You have to be done by noon. So you start early, and there's usually a group, and it's usually high school kids that they hire. They don't do this. Is sort of a lost art. They don't do this so much anymore because it's all been replaced by chemicals to kill weeds. But back in the day, we would walk the beans, and you were armed with a hoe, and they would give you the row that you were to walk in, and you would just start walking down that row, and you'd come across a weed, and you'd just yank that weed out. Simple. Very satisfying, too, I might say. At the end of a long day, after you've cleared a field, and you can stand back and you can just see how it's just clean and not a weed in sight, right? It's very satisfying. Except on occasion, you walk along and you just pluck a weed out, usually stink weeds, at least in Illinois. Pluck it out, move along, pluck it out. You might talk, you might have a Walkman. We had Walkman, remember that? Yeah. And they pluck them out, but occasionally you'd come across, a random stalk of corn, an ear of corn would growing with the soy, or a stinkweed that had gotten mixed up with the soybean so much that if you pull it out, you're going to pull out the soy plant too. And then you have to make this decision about is it better to just pull them both up, or is it better to leave them both? Most of the farmers back then would say, don't destroy the plants, because that's the harvest. Don't. So you just do the best you can. Maybe cut it. Don't take out the root. Then there would be a time when you would come across a patch, like of thistle, or like where there would be just a big patch of these weeds. They're very invasive, and if they take off, they really can go to town on a whole field. And so when that happens, when you come up to a patch where there's a big patch and then you call for help, right? Then everybody stops and brings their hose over, and you work together to clear that patch out. Isn't that good life lessons? Can you see that? We all work together when it's necessary. Walking beans. I always think of walking beans when I hear this parable because it's so, I can't help it. I have to go back to my walking bean days where you're thinking about, is it better to yank out that weed along with that plant, which is the good harvest that produces the good fruit and the things that are useful, or is it better to leave it? And the farmers would say one or two of those plants is not going to mess anything up. It's just when it takes over. So here's Jesus giving us this parable. And I think it's so fascinating. We as Christians, I think we've gotten it wrong for a long, long time, right? You can see this happening in our world all the time where good Christian people with what people would say, good Christian values, really taking hard stands about certain things, about sexuality and orientation or just name any political idea in the world today. And there are good Christian people really fighting hard against or for, which is okay. We are called to stand up for justice, right? To know when there's a just cause. think what I see that troubles me in the world today, probably you too, I hope it does bother you, that we are so divided. And we spend so much time pointing our fingers in accusation. And then so many people who claim to be Christian use this type of parable, this parable itself, as justification to point fingers about who's going to go to hell and burn up in the fires, with who's the weed growing up amongst. When what Jesus is really saying to us is tend your own garden. Mind your own life. Live your life in a way that is just, that is kind. Did you know that this week is Kindness Week? It's Kindness Week. We have to have a Kindness Week. We should be kind all the time, but this week especially be kind. I think that's great. It's a good reminder. Be kind. I saw a sign, kindness, kind words cost nothing. Tend your own. So rather than going through the fields and pointing out and plucking out the weeds, let them be and tend your own. Is that really all we have to do? What do we do with things like, did you know in 1925, in Columbia, Tennessee, a young black man, 18-year-old black boy, was arrested for assaulting a 16-year-old white girl. He was arrested, he confessed through force, and was being held in the Maury County courthouse, where a mob of 100 white people stormed into the courthouse and kidnapped him while he was waiting trial. They kidnapped him. Sorry for the gory details, it's the truth though. It's that they kidnapped him and they took him outside and they tied him up and they pulled him behind a vehicle all over town. Good Christian people doing this. And then eventually they brought him back to the courthouse and lynched him. The girl was never able to identify or verify. And even if she was, is that really justice? Is that what we are asked to do and to be a justice? You may be aware that in this last few days, there's been this blow up, sort of this media thing with this country music singer. I'm not going to say his name, whose song came out this week. And the song actually came out a month ago, but his video came out this week. And in the video, he is featured he and his band playing in front of the Maury County Courthouse with this horrible history. And that's not the only horrible thing that happened in that courthouse, but it's a big one. And the lyrics of the song seem benign enough if you just sort of don't, I mean, they're not really brilliant, and it's not my cup of tea, but when you put it singing in front of the courthouse, it brings this really horrible connotation and statement. And there's a lot of strong feelings going on. I don't know if you're following this, but on Facebook and social media, we're seeing, it's become this explosive, divisive thing right now where people are really, posting memes. I got a lot of, I grew up in a small town, not far from John Mellencamp, by the way. And I know a lot. I get the name of the song is Try That in a Small Town. So I understand the mentality. I understand the feelings and what's going on. And I have a lot of friends posting, I stand with this person, the singer. And then I have other friends who are posting these long diatribes of what's wrong with it and all the things that are wrong. And of course, I agree and I see that too. But what I'm troubled about is our inability to communicate about what and express and listen to each other about what really is at the heart of it. What our inability to take time to try to understand and to learn from each other what's really going on. What do we really need to hear? What do we really need to know? What do we really need to change? And how could we do it in a way that isn't about yanking up the weed and the soybean plant together? How do we do that? So, I don't know. But I suspect, if you listen to the parable, I suspect what Jesus is telling us, instructing us, is to tend your own garden first. Because when you're tending your own garden, when you are truly living as if the realm of God exists within you, as if the realm of God is already here, then you don't have to feel so threatened by it all. You can actually create the space for those conversations to happen in a way that might just change in a good way. We might just find a new third way, the path through this, if we start with our own rather than running out with our hose and identifying and taking out all the weeds. You're a weed. You're a weed. Maybe, just maybe, that's my prayer. My prayer, really, truly, my prayer is that we who claim to be Christian actually start following the teachings of Christ. Put your hose away. Well, no, don't. You can use it. Use it in your own garden. May it be so.